Tuesday morning all-hands meetings were always the same. The clunky projector that never worked right, the weak coffee and mismatched mugs, and that forced small talk that made me want to crawl under my chair. My name is Dave Miller. I'm 48 years old, the operations manager in our Minneapolis office. I've been at this job for over 12 years, long enough to know that nothing at these meetings ever really changed, or so I thought. That morning, I settled into my usual seat in the middle row. I tried to look more alert than I felt, but the truth was I was running on fumes. My team had just pulled off a minor miracle over the weekend, a complete logistics overhaul in 48 hours, all because of a last-minute oops from corporate. We did it, of course. We always did. But I was so tired, my head buzzing from too much coffee and not enough sleep. Jackson Vance, our new CEO, took the stage like he was born for it. He had that slick, fresh out of business school look, bright eyes, tailored suit, that endless optimism that made him seem more like a motivational speaker than a boss. He was only in his early 30s, full of that TED Talk swagger that didn't leave room for second opinions. "Good morning, team," he said, flashing a smile so bright it could have lit up the room without the overhead lights. "Today is about change. Today, we're going to talk about vision." I bit my tongue. Vision. That was a word I'd heard more times than I could count, but I had learned that when Jackson said it, it was never just about pep talks. Behind him stood Lucas Trent, the new efficiency strategist. He'd been in the office maybe a month, but he'd already managed to rub everyone the wrong way. He had that look, hair slicked back, smug smile that never quite reached his eyes. He leaned against the wall like he owned the place, and when he caught my eye, he gave me the smallest of smirks. I don't know what it was, but something in that smirk made my skin crawl. Jackson kept talking, stringing together words like agility and synergy and breaking down silos. I swear, if I heard disruption one more time, I was going to put my head down on the conference table and take a nap. Around me, people were pretending to take notes, tapping away at their laptops. Some were scrolling on their phones. It was all the same to me. I shifted in my seat and tried to focus. We had just pulled off a logistical miracle, and here was Jackson, talking like we were stuck in the Stone Age. My team had given everything they had, missed dinners, missed sleep, missed time with their kids, and now we were listening to a lecture about how we needed to change. "And that's why," Jackson said, his tone softening like he was about to say something really important, "we have to be willing to make some tough decisions, to ensure we're not just keeping up, but staying ahead." Tough decisions. I felt a cold wave wash over me. I'd heard that phrase before. I knew exactly what it meant. I stole another glance at Lucas, and he was grinning now, like he'd just heard the best joke of his life. My heart started pounding in my chest. I could feel it, the unspoken message behind the bright smiles and polished words. This wasn't just another meeting. This was a warning. Jackson wrapped up his speech with a polite, rehearsed smile. "Thank you all. Let's keep pushing forward together," he said, stepping aside as Lucas took the mic. Lucas didn't waste any time. He scanned the room like a wolf sizing up a herd of sheep. "We're going to be evaluating every department," he said, his voice calm and cold. "We're going to identify redundancies and inefficiencies, because that's how we stay competitive." Redundancies and inefficiencies. My stomach sank. I'd been at this company long enough to know what that meant. Layoffs, cuts. And I also knew exactly who they meant when they talked about legacy systems and old ways of thinking. Guys like me, the veterans, the ones who remembered how things used to work. The meeting ended with a half-hearted round of applause. People shuffled out of the room, some of them looking worried, others just relieved to be done. I stayed in my seat a minute longer, my mind racing. Around me, the office buzzed back to life, people heading to their desks like nothing had happened. But I knew better. As I stood up, I caught Lucas's eye one last time. He gave me a smile, small and smug, like he was already counting down the days until I was gone. I turned away, my hands shaking with anger I didn't dare show. Not yet. I walked back to my desk and sat down, staring at my screen without really seeing it. I thought about the long nights, the weekends sacrificed to fix problems that shouldn't have been mine. And now, after everything, we were just deadweight, easy targets in their shiny new plan. But I wasn't going to let them erase us without a fight. I could feel it deep in my chest, something hard and unmovable, like a crack in the ceiling that only got bigger when you ignored it. If they thought we were going to go quietly, they were in for a surprise. I got to the office early Wednesday morning, the air still and quiet. For a few minutes, it felt like everything was normal again. The hum of the HVAC, the squeak of the elevator door, the smell of burnt coffee in the break room. It was the only part of the day that still felt like mine. I took my time getting settled, savoring those precious minutes before the rest of the world came in to ruin it. I've always liked the early hours, when you could hear your own thoughts without someone breathing down your neck. I checked the logs from last night. My team had stayed late again, running the numbers to fix a glitch that was never ours in the first place. 65% of process improvements in the last year had come from our department, but you wouldn't know it if you listened to Lucas. By 9 o'clock, the office was buzzing again. The usual chatter, people milling around the coffee machine, the low rumble of keyboards. I was grabbing a stale donut from the lounge when Lucas came in, his voice slicing through the air. He was talking to a couple of new hires, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Seriously, are we still using Excel sheets around here?" he said, grinning like it was the funniest thing in the world. I thought we were supposed to be a tech company, not a dinosaur park. A couple of the new guys laughed, a quick, nervous sound, but I just felt the flush of heat rise in my cheeks. My team was in that joke. We were the dinosaurs. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. It wasn't just a joke. It was a message. Lucas didn't see us as people. We were just relics, placeholders, dead weight. I took a deep breath and walked back to my office, my mind already racing. I wasn't going to fight him with words. I was going to fight him with something better. At lunch, I met up with Martin. He was the only one left from my early days, the kind of guy who still believed in the work, not just the politics. We found a quiet booth at a diner across the street, the place we always went when we needed to say the things we couldn't say in the office. "You heard him this morning," I said, stirring my coffee until it was too bitter to drink. "We're a punchline now." Martin leaned back, his expression tired. "It's not about updates," he said. "It's about removing history. That's what they're doing, wiping the slate clean so they can rewrite it." I thought about that on the walk back to the office. Wiping the slate clean. It felt like a knife in the gut. All those years of work, the late nights, the weekends, erased with a single smirk. That night, after the kids were asleep and the house was finally quiet, I dug out an old file I hadn't touched in months. A little side tool I'd built to track departmental contributions. It was clunky, not pretty to look at, just lines of code and raw data. But it worked. Better than most of the dashboards they spent millions on. I opened it and let the numbers tell the story. 65% of process improvements in the last year? Ours. 72% of cost reductions? Us. All of it. They're in black and white, stripped of the nonsense buzzwords. I didn't plan to argue with them. I didn't plan to defend myself. I planned to show them the truth. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I kept working, tweaking the tool, adding in the most recent data. I made it bulletproof, something they couldn't just wave away with a smile. By the time the sun rose, I had something that would speak for itself. I didn't know how I was going to use it yet, but I knew I had to, because the jokes weren't just jokes anymore. They were lines in the sand. As I sat there, staring at the glow of the screen in the half-light, I felt something shift inside me. For years, I'd been the guy who kept his head down, did the work, took the hits. But Lucas was right about one thing: the old ways weren't enough anymore. This wasn't about clunky tools or old software. It was about being seen. And if they were going to pretend we didn't matter, I was going to make damn sure the numbers proved otherwise. I shut the laptop and leaned back in my chair, the quiet of the morning pressing in around me. For the first time in a long time, I felt ready. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about not letting them erase what we'd built. Let the numbers talk. Thursday morning felt different. I was running on barely 3 hours of sleep, but I was wired, not from the coffee, but from that file I'd been building. The one that told the story no one else was willing to see. The one that laid it all out. Who did the real work? Who kept this place running? I spent the first couple hours piloting it with my team. No one asked questions. They just watched as the numbers filled the screen. The faces around me, normally so worn down, started to change. Ted in DevOps, Sarah from HR, even quiet Tom in facilities, they all leaned in closer, their eyes wide. The data didn't just tell them what they did. It proved it. I clicked through the tabs, pointing out the trends. 72% of high-performing outcomes came directly from our work, I said, my voice low but steady. Every single improvement they're bragging about, we're the reason it exists. I didn't have to tell them what it meant. They saw it for themselves. The laughter from Lucas, the smirks from Jackson, none of it could erase this. For the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of pride in my team's eyes, and that was enough to keep me going. By lunch, I booked a one-on-one with Jackson. He accepted it, probably thinking I was coming in to apologize or ask for a seat at the new table. Let him think that. I needed him to see this with his own eyes. When I stepped into his office, he was already scrolling through emails. He looked up, giving me the practice smile. "Dave," he said, "what's on your mind?" I plugged in my laptop and let the dashboard load. The bright blue charts filled the screen, clean and precise. Jackson's smile faltered, just a flicker, but I saw it. "I wanted to show you this," I said, clicking through the tabs. "It's a performance tracker. Real data, real numbers. No buzzwords, just proof. He leaned forward, squinting at the screen. You built this. I nodded, on my own time, because I wanted to know the truth. He didn't say anything, just scrolled through the columns, his lips pressed tight. The room was so quiet, I could hear the faint buzz of the lights overhead. After a long pause, he looked up at me. Why are you showing me this? He asked, his tone carefully neutral. I met his gaze. Because your culture is becoming toxic. The wrong people are calling the shots. And if you keep ignoring the people who actually build the backbone of this company, you're going to lose everything. His fingers drummed on the desk. You're not threatening me, are you, Dave? He said lightly. I shook my head. No threats, just the truth. You wanted to talk about agility and disruption? This is it. This is what you're risking by letting guys like Lucas decide who matters. He sat back, staring at the numbers on the screen. For a second, he looked almost rattled. Like maybe he believed his own story for so long, he'd forgotten what the real one looked like. Finally, he spoke. So why are you showing me this instead of just quitting? He asked, voice low. I paused for a moment, letting the question sink in. Because I protect the builders, I said simply. The people who do the work. The people who've given years of their lives to this place. Jackson didn't have a comeback. He just sat there, silent, the weight of the numbers pressing down on him as he realized they didn't match his story. I stood up, closing the laptop. I'm not looking for a fight, I said. I'm looking for the truth. If you can't see it, that's on you. I walked out of his office without another word, my shoulders set and my mind clear. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. They couldn't pretend we were invisible anymore. This wasn't rebellion. It was exposure. The next week passed in a blur. The office was on edge. Every conversation dipped in hushed tones, every glance a little more wary. It was like we could all sense something coming, and on Friday morning, it did. They called an emergency all-hands meeting. The kind where you know it's bad news the second you see it on your calendar. We filed into the same conference room we always did, but this time there was no weak coffee or awkward small talk. Just tension so thick you could practically taste it. Jackson stood at the front, his expression blank. Lucas hovered behind him, that same smug half-smile on his face. I took a seat near the back, next to Martin, who just gave me a small, tight nod. We both knew what was coming. Jackson cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming on short notice, he began, his voice calm, too calm. We've spent the last month analyzing our operations, and we've realized that to stay competitive, we have to make some difficult decisions. I felt my stomach drop. Around me, I could see heads turning, shoulders tensing. We all knew what that meant. Jackson kept talking, but it was Lucas who really sealed it. Effective immediately, he said. Stepping forward, we're going to begin a realignment. If you're 40 or older, HR will be in touch. It's time for new blood. The room went dead silent. For a second, it was like no one could believe what they'd just heard. Then the murmurs started, angry, shocked, confused. I felt my hands curl into fists, my nails biting into my palms. They didn't even try to dress it up. No talk about transitions or mentorship. Just a blunt, surgical cut. I was handed a folder by HR right there in the room. Pre-filled resignation form. Non-disclosure agreement. My name typed neatly at the top. No conversation, no warning. Just a form, like it was already decided I'd sign. I looked over at Martin. His face was pale, but he didn't say a word. Around us, the older employees were already packing up their things, heads down, shoulders hunched. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the folder back in Lucas's face. But instead, I just stood there, holding that thin stack of papers like it was the heaviest thing in the world. By noon, half the floor was gone. People I'd worked with for years, the ones who'd built this company, brick by brick, vanished in the space of a few hours. I watched them walk out with boxes of their lives in their arms, heads bowed like criminals. I signed the resignation form, but not because I accepted defeat. I signed it because I knew this wasn't the end. This was the fuse. I wasn't leaving. I was recalibrating. As I cleared out my desk, I caught Lucas watching me, his arms crossed, that smirk still on his face. I gave him a long look, not anger, not fear, just a calm that came from knowing he had no idea what was coming next. Martin clapped a hand on my shoulder as I packed the last of my things. We're not done, Dave, he said quietly. We're not done. And I believed him, because in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about me or my job. It was about something bigger, something worth fighting for. As I walked out of the office for the last time, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. They thought they'd gotten rid of us, that we'd go quietly, but they didn't understand what they'd just done. They'd woken us up. The next couple of days felt like the eye of a storm, everything calm on the surface, but I knew there was a world of chaos brewing underneath. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Ted from DevOps called first, then Joelle in legal, and finally Marcus from design. One by one, they all said the same thing. They were in. We met in a co-working space downtown, a cheap spot with second-hand chairs and flickering fluorescent lights. It was a far cry from the glossy office we just left behind, but none of us cared. We weren't there for appearances. I spread out my laptop on a battered table, pulling up the tool I'd been refining in secret. Ted hovered over my shoulder, already poking at the code. "We can lock this down tighter," he said. "Encrypt the back end, limit access to just us." He looked at me with that fierce glint in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. "They won't see this coming." Joelle was already making notes in her worn leather planner. "If they come after us legally, we'll be ready," she said. "I'll build the framework so they can't claim this is sabotage. It's our work. We're just proving it." "And Marcus?" Marcus was sketching something on his tablet, fingers flying across the screen. "A campaign, simple, direct, built by the fired. Running without them? Good luck." His voice was calm, but his eyes were bright. "We're not burning bridges," he said. "We're just showing them how far they've drifted from the people who made this company work." We worked for hours that first night, hunched over coffee cups and half-eaten takeout. It was different than the office. No hierarchy, no layers of approvals or endless meetings. Just a handful of people who knew what mattered and weren't afraid to fight for it. Lucas, meanwhile, was still strutting around the half-empty office like a rooster in a yard he thought he owned. Word was he'd been bragging to anyone who'd listen about how he'd cleaned house, how the company was leaner now. But I knew better. He hadn't cleaned house. He'd cut out its heart. Ted tapped me on the shoulder as I was poring over some new data he'd pulled. "You realize," he said, "this isn't just about getting our jobs back, right? This is about showing them that they can't erase the people who keep the lights on." I nodded slowly. He was right. For years, we'd been the invisible ones, the ones who fixed the broken things in the middle of the night, who kept the gears turning while the execs gave speeches about synergy and innovation. They thought we'd stay invisible forever. They were wrong. As the sun came up, we packed up our gear and stepped out into the early morning chill. The streets were quiet, the city still asleep, but I felt more awake than I had in years. We didn't have a master plan yet. We didn't need one. We had something better, each other. And we had the proof, the data that showed just how much the company depended on us. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew they'd come after us if they figured out what we were doing. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was just trying to survive. I felt like I was building something. No revenge speeches, no rage posts, just strategy, just the quiet, stubborn determination of people who refused to be erased. As we walked back to our cars, Ted turned to me. "We're going to make them remember," he said. I smiled. "Oh, they'll remember." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. 2 weeks after the purge, I was sipping stale coffee at the co-working space when I got the message. Lucas wanted to meet. My gut tightened. I knew he wasn't reaching out because he missed me. I knew there was something else, something he was scared of. We met at a little cafe near the river, one of those places with mismatched furniture and half-burnt scones. I spotted him right away, hunched over a table by the window. He looked different. No crisp suit, no smug grin. Just a guy who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Dave," he said when I sat down, his voice low and shaky. I didn't know they'd go that far. I stared at him for a long moment, trying to read his face. Part of me wanted to get up and walk out, but something in his eyes stopped me. There was no smugness left, no swagger, just desperation. "What do you want, Lucas?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. He slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything," he said. "Dylan's real strategy. The recordings. The purge was planned, months in advance." I didn't reach for the drive. I just looked at him. "Why now?" I asked. "Why come to me?" He shifted in his seat, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. "Because I didn't know it would be like this," he said. "I thought it was just going to be performance reviews, restructuring, not this." I still didn't trust him. I could see the way his hands shook, the way he kept glancing around like he expected someone to be listening. But the thing that really stuck with me was the fear in his voice. Lucas wasn't the kind of guy who scared easily. I took the USB drive and slipped it into my pocket. "You realize this doesn't make us friends," I said quietly. "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "But you're the only one who'll know what to do with it." Back at the co-working space, the team was already waiting. Joelle looked up from her laptop as I walked in. "Well?" she asked. "He handed me this," I said, holding up the USB. "Claims it's everything. Proof of how deep this goes." Ted leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What do you think? Trap?" "Maybe," I said, but he looked like a man who's lost everything. "If it's real, it's the crack we've been waiting for." We plugged it in, and the room went silent. Recordings, spreadsheets, emails. Dylan's voice on tape, calm and cold. "We're not getting rid of deadweight. We're eliminating the old guard. Anyone over 40, anyone who questions, they're gone. That's how you build a culture of innovation. Joelle's face went white as she listened. This is enough to bring the whole thing down, she said softly. Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. So we use him, he said, but we don't trust him. Lucas is a cockroach. He's only here because he's scared. I nodded slowly, the weight of the recording settling in my chest. This wasn't just a fight for our jobs anymore. This was about exposing the rot at the heart of the company. The team fell quiet for a moment, the only sound the hum of the old fridge in the corner. Then Ted spoke up, his voice steady. We play it smart. No drama. No noise. We use this. And when they try to spin it, we've already won. I looked around the room, at the people who refused to be erased, who knew the stakes and didn't flinch. And for the first time since this all started, I felt like we were finally in control. Lucas might have switched sides out of fear, but the rest of us? We were here out of principle, out of survival, out of the need to prove that we weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. As I shut the laptop and looked around the room, I realized this wasn't just about saving ourselves anymore. It was about making sure they never forgot what they tried to do to us. We weren't done, not by a long shot. We didn't waste time. That night, Ted and I worked side by side in that cramped co-working space. The glow of our screens the only light we needed. Joelle was busy drafting airtight legal language. Marcus started laying the groundwork for what he called our silent campaign. No drama, no noise, just quiet exposure. Our first move was a performance report. We didn't sign it. We didn't brand it. We just leaked it. A simple, stark document showing that since the so-called realignment, company output had dropped by 42%. No commentary, no spin, just numbers. Within hours, the office buzzed with it. Slack threads lit up with questions, rumors flying faster than HR could tamp them down. Jackson and Lucas tried to keep a lid on it, calling it an anomaly, but the truth was right there in the data. A few days later, Marcus had his first blog post live on a popular industry site. The headline was surgical in its precision. When experience leaves, so does excellence. No names, no finger-pointing, just a calm, damning look at what happens when you think culture means cutting out the people who built it. Meanwhile, Lucas fed us more. He was careful, sending files late at night, dropping hints in encrypted messages, employee churn rates, client complaints, back-end logs showing system failures that never made it into the weekly updates. Each piece a small crack in the carefully constructed lie. We didn't scream it from the rooftops. We didn't want noise. We wanted the cracks to show on their own, slowly widening until the whole structure buckled under its own weight. I still remember the first time someone from the board reached out. A short email, polite but curious. We're hearing concerns. Would you be open to discussing them? It was a start, a small tremor that told us the cracks were turning into canyons. Joelle smiled when she read it. This is what happens, she said, when you trade loyalty for buzzwords. We spent our nights gathering more testimonies from people who'd been pushed out, screenshots of Jackson's motivational nonsense clashing with the reality of burnout and stress. The more we found, the more I realized they'd built a house of cards. All we had to do was let the wind blow. At the end of one long night, Marcus looked up from his laptop. You think they'll survive this? He asked. I leaned back in my chair, the tiredness in my bones softened by something that felt like hope. If they do, they'll never forget how close they came to losing it all. He nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. Good, because they need to remember. We didn't want to destroy the company. We wanted to save what was worth saving. The people, the work, the parts of it that still felt like home. But we weren't going to let them pretend anymore. No public war, no personal attacks, just the quiet, relentless weight of the truth. And as I watched the data pile up, as I saw the panic start to flicker behind Jackson's perfect smile, I knew this wasn't just a rebellion. It was a reckoning. It happened faster than I thought it would. One by one, the systems they'd tried to run without us started failing. The first was a minor glitch in an old client tool, something no one had touched in years, except we had. My team had always patched it quietly, no fanfare. Now it was breaking down for everyone to see. Then it was the archives. Gone. Years of data. Wiped out because Lucas's bright idea of simplifying workflows didn't bother with backups. Clients were calling, asking why they couldn't access their own files, and all the fresh-faced strategists could do was shrug and point fingers. Slack screenshots started flooding in. Screenshots of panic, developers begging for help, HR flailing to control the narrative, managers in full meltdown mode. I watched them all with a strange calm. The same way you watch a tower of cards start to sway in a breeze you warned them about. And then the final blow hit. Someone, Lucas, I suspected, leaked a clip from a private meeting. Dylan, caught off guard, his voice low and dismissive. "The veterans? They're just clogged arteries in our flow," he said. "They need to be cut out so the real work can happen." I watched it on my phone, the words playing over and over. I didn't feel shock. I didn't feel anger. I felt resolved. That was the line that would finish this. By the next morning, the clip had gone viral inside the company. HR tried to spin it, taken out of context, not reflective of our values. But the damage was done. The board called an emergency review. Dylan was nowhere to be seen. And Lucas? Lucas was suddenly silent. That afternoon, I got an email. One line, formal and cold. "Reinstatement opportunity. Immediate response requested." I stared at it for a long moment, the words swimming in front of me. They didn't say it outright, but I knew what it meant. They wanted us back. They needed us back. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. All this time, they'd acted like we were just relics, too old, too slow, too stubborn. Now they were realizing the truth. We were the spine holding the whole thing up. I called Ted first. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight. "You saw it?" "I did," I said. "They're finally asking." He let out a shaky laugh. "They're asking because they're desperate." "Exactly," I said. "So let's make sure they know we're not crawling back. If we go, it's on our terms." "Agreed," he said. "Let's meet tonight." I hung up and looked around the small workspace we'd claimed as our war room. It was cramped and cluttered, but in that moment, it felt like the heart of everything. The real work, the real people. They thought they could cut us out and not miss a beat. But they were wrong. And now? Now they had to face the fact that you can't just erase the people who keep the lights on. As I shut my laptop and walked out into the fading light, I felt a strange, quiet joy in my chest. Not because we'd won, not yet, but because they finally understood what we'd been trying to tell them all along. You can't kill the builders. We met that night in the same battered co-working space, the quiet hum of the old heater keeping the chill at bay. Ted was the first to speak, tapping a finger on his battered laptop. "They want us back," he said, his voice even, "but not on their terms." Joelle was already drafting something on her tablet, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to be clear," she said. "This isn't a negotiation. This is a statement. We'll return, but only if Dylan is out, and Lucas too." Marcus, who'd been quiet most of the night, finally looked up from his sketches. "And we make it public. They don't get to rewrite the story in a boardroom behind closed doors." I nodded slowly. "We'll send them a letter. Clear, factual, no anger, just the truth." It took hours, but when we were done, the letter was simple and undeniable. We laid it out. The conditions for our return, the roles we expected to play, the people who had to be gone for good. No threats, no drama, just the terms of rebuilding the company without the poison that had almost killed it. I sent the letter directly to the board. 48 hours later, the fallout began. First came Lucas's resignation, a carefully worded email to the entire company, full of corporate nonsense about new opportunities and fresh challenges. Nobody bought it, not after what he'd done. Then, Dylan stepped back, citing personal reasons and the need for reflection. That was corporate speak for, "You're out, and you know it." When the board called me directly, it was the first time I'd heard real humility in their voices. They wanted me to come back, to take the reins again, not to restore the old ways, but to redesign them. I said yes, but on my terms. Walking back into that office was like stepping into a ghost town. Half the desks were empty, the energy brittle and uncertain. But the people who were still there, they met my eyes with something I hadn't seen in a long time: hope. I didn't waste time on speeches or promises. I called a meeting with the veterans, the ones who'd been cast out, the ones who'd been silenced. "We're not here to go back," I told them. "We're here to make this place better than it ever was." And they believed me, because they'd seen what happened when the wrong people were in charge. Of course, Lucas couldn't leave quietly. A week later, he tried one last smear campaign. A long, rambling blog post about how we were relics of the past, how we'd hijacked the culture to cling to jobs we didn't deserve. I didn't bother responding. The truth was already out there, in the numbers and the cracks that had split the company wide open. Lucas's words were just noise, and everyone could see it. In the weeks that followed, the office slowly came back to life. Not the old life, something better. The veterans were no longer ghosts in the corner. They were leaders again. And the younger people who'd stuck it out, they looked at us with something close to respect. Like they finally understood that experience isn't a burden. It's the foundation. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was building. And this time, we were going to build it on our terms, not theirs. Lucas's last attempt to smear us showed up on a random Monday. A blog post full of half-truths and bitter fabrications, calling us dinosaurs, blaming us for stalling progress, for holding the company hostage. I read it once, then again, feeling a slow burn in my chest. But this time, I didn't feel rage. I felt ready, because I had the logs. I had the emails, the backups, the timestamps. Every number, every line of code, every late-night fix we'd done that kept this company from collapsing. The evidence of who'd really been holding things together, and who'd nearly torn it apart. When Lucas's posts started making rounds on social media, I didn't respond in public. I didn't have to. My team did. Ted posted a simple thread, linking our archived data and receipts, showing exactly how much of the company's so-called innovation rested on the veterans' shoulders. Joelle reached out to a friend in legal media, sharing the full story, not rumors, not gossip, just the hard facts. It was over in a day. The blog post was taken down. Lucas's consulting firm, the one he bragged about launching, folded before it even had a chance to get off the ground. And the admins of the site that had published his rant, they sent me an apology email, saying they had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. Meanwhile, back in the office, we were finally getting back to work. Real work, not just cleaning up after someone else's mess. Clients were coming back, slowly but steadily. The energy in the office shifted. People were smiling again, talking again, like they'd remembered what it was to actually care about what we did. I spent those weeks focusing on the team, rebuilding trust where it had been shattered. We didn't pretend it was perfect, but it was honest. And for the first time, it felt like we were building something that would last because we finally understood what made us different: experience. And experience, when you respect it, isn't a relic of the past. It's what makes you unstoppable. One Friday afternoon, as the sun dipped low outside my office window, I found a moment to breathe. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the quiet satisfaction settle into my bones. I thought about everything we'd been through, the late nights, the betrayals, the cracks that had turned into canyons, and I realized something. We didn't just survive. We proved that experience matters. That skill and loyalty and sweat can't be replaced by buzzwords and PowerPoints. And we didn't need anyone's permission to take our place at the table. Later that night, I heard that Lucas was out there, floating from startup to startup, trying to find someone who'd take him. Begging, basically. And me? I didn't spare him more than a passing thought, because I was too busy building something real, not a legacy for myself, but for everyone who'd ever been told they were too old, too slow, too stuck in their ways. They called us relics. They called us deadweight. But when the dust cleared, it was the veterans who stood there with the proof. And me? I was finally done explaining myself to people who never really listened. Because in the end, we didn't just win. We rewrote the rules. And in this company, this rebuilt, reimagined company, the ones who kept the lights on would never be forgotten again.